Hello. I'm back with another color related video today, and it's been a while since I've talked about colors on this channel. After creating the whole 10 episode deep dive series on color analysis earlier this year, I honestly got a little bit sick and tired of talking about colors, and I needed to step away from it for a hot minute. But it looks like TikTok has this new trend going on finding your contrast level. And if you remember from my deep dive series, contrast was actually the first topic that I had brought up in the series. So I thought this would be a good time to revisit the topic and talk about why contrast level is important and how we can incorporate it into our styles. So today I'm going to show you how the TikTok filter for finding your contrast level works and how we can maximize the use of it. So let's first talk about why knowing our contrast level is important to begin with. It's because it helps us narrow down the color groups that will look harmonious with our own coloring. And I've talked about this in relation to color seasons in my previous contrast video, that there is a relationship between your contrast level and your color season. So if you have high contrast, then you could be any of the winter sub-seasons, or you could be a bright spring or a deep autumn. And if you have low contrast, then you are likely in one of the light seasons or one of the soft seasons. Or if you have medium contrast, then you could be any of the 4 true seasons, or you could also be one of the soft seasons. Now, this is in relation to the 12 season system, but there could be more variations if you're looking at systems that use more than 12 subseasons. Knowing our contrast level also helps us make better styling choices because it helps us decide how dynamic we want to go with our color combinations. So if we're choosing separate colors for our tops and our bottoms, then knowing our contrast level in our own coloring can help us determine whether we want to go with a high or low contrast combination in our outfits. Also remember that contrast is found not only between two colors in an outfit, but it can also be created against our skin tone. So knowing our contrast level really helps us understand colors that will create that optimal level of contrast against our own coloring. If we look at deep winter, for example, if we're just looking at the color palette for deep winters alone, the color gray is included in the palette. But wearing the gray alone as a deep winter can still create a very low level of contrast against the skin, and it can still look off. So regardless of whether the color belongs to a specific season or not, we still need to incorporate the right level of contrast that matches what's found in our own coloring in order for the color to appear harmonious. So it's not just about wearing the right colors within a specific season, but it's really more about how to put the colors together that really matters. Now there's different types of contrast that can be created with colors. We can use value to create contrast, so between light and dark colors. Contrast can also be created through saturation or through temperature, etc. But the easiest one to start with is the value, so the difference between light versus dark colors. And that's what the TikTok filter for finding your contrast level is about. So now I'm going to show you how this filter works. Okay, so when you go on TikTok, if you search what's your contrast, the first effect that's going to pop up is literally called what's your contrast, and that's the filter that we're going to be using. And then it gives you some instructions. So step 1 is to select your skin tone level or your skin depth. And if you click on next, step 2 is to now try on the different contrasts between high, medium, and low to see which one matches you the best. So now tap on shall we start? And then it also gives you some additional instructions like face toward natural light, which I'm currently doing, and no makeup, which I'm not wearing right now. So let's start with step 1, which is choosing the skin tone level or your skin depth. Now, I know that my skin depth is medium, but if you're not sure, you can just select any skin tone and click on the contrast level to see whether the skin tone actually matches your actual skin tone. So we can see here that light skin tone is not going to be a match for me, but if we go to medium, now that matches a lot better to my actual skin tone. So let's start with low contrast. So here we can see that I'm definitely not low contrast because there's too much depth in my hair, and my eye color is also much darker than what's being shown on the drawing on the left side. Now, if we switch over to medium contrast, now that is a much better match. The eyebrows match almost exactly, and the eye color as well. There's enough depth in the drawing as much as what's being shown on my face. And I do think that my hair color is a little bit deeper still than what's being shown on the drawing. So if we switch over to high contrast, now I feel like the hair color is a much better match. Like my natural hair is pretty dark, so I feel like this is a pretty good match. The drawing is maybe slightly darker, but the eyebrows, we can definitely see there's a big difference between what's being shown on the drawing versus what's being shown on my face. The eye color I feel like is still pretty similar, but I actually don't think there's a difference between the medium and the high contrast in terms of the eye color depth. So I would say I fall somewhere right in the middle between medium and high contrast. So as you can see, the filter is not perfect, but it does provide a pretty good baseline to start off this whole process of finding your contrast level. And now we're going to talk a little bit more about how to make the best use of this information that we just found out. Now for this next step, we're going to need our phone camera, and we're going to switch over to shooting in black and white mode for this step. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through our closet and find some items of varying value levels. So we'll start with the lightest and darkest colors first, and true white and true black will work best for this. But if you don't have true white or true black in your closet, then you can use any fabric that you can find around the house, like towels or blankets. I'd also suggest avoiding any large ribbed fabric for this because the texture tends to create shadows and darkens lighter colored fabrics, and the light also reflects off of the texture and it tends to lighten the darkness for darker fabrics. So I suggest sticking to fabric with flat texture with minimal details. Okay, once you found your lightest and darkest fabrics, the next step is to find 3 or more items of varying lightness or value in between those two shades. Now you can use your phone camera to see how light or dark of a gray the fabric appears in black and white mode. For example, I've got this navy sweater that becomes this very dark gray when we're shooting in black and white mode. So it's just slightly lighter than a true black. So go through your closet or really anywhere in the house to find 5 or more items in total of varying value or lightness levels from white to black. And don't worry about the actual color, just focus on using your phone camera in black and white mode to find a wide enough range of different grays. Obviously, the more shades of grays, the more accurate the results will be. I'm using 10 different fabrics here, but you can use less than that. Just make sure to use 5 or more. Now we're going to do a little draping exercise. So turn the phone camera around to selfie mode in black and white and try draping the fabrics one by one, and make sure to take photos of each of them to make comparisons. So for me, according to TikTok, I'm right in between medium and high contrast, and we can see in the photos as well that a true black does look a little bit overwhelming on me. Like the eyes go to the black first rather than my face, and there's more shadows created under my face. But with a slightly lighter gray, the shade is not as overwhelming. And this is with the navy sweater that I showed you earlier. Now, as we move on to lighter shades towards medium grays, we can see how the shades really start to wash me out, and they bring out more shadows in my face compared to the darker grays. And we can also see more blemishes and impurities in my skin. And then as the grays become lighter, closer to white, then it starts to look better again. Like my skin looks cleaner and I look less tired. This is because white creates a higher level of contrast against my skin. So comparing medium gray and white, the gray is much closer to my actual skin color, so the contrast between the fabric and the skin is lower. So my skin definitely looks clearer and my features pop more when the contrast level is decently high. And that tells me that my contrast level leans closer to high than medium. All right, so the point of this exercise is really to develop an eye to catch the varying levels of value in different colors and understanding what range of value really looks harmonious against my own coloring. Like I said, black and white create the highest level of contrast against the skin because they have that eye-catching quality to them. So if you have very high contrast, then these colors won't appear overwhelming on you and they're gonna make your features pop more. Whereas if you have low contrast, then black or white are gonna have a tendency to draw the attention away from your face. On the other hand, if you have high contrast, then shades that create a low level of contrast are gonna drag your face down and make you look very tired, whereas the opposite effect will happen if you have low contrast. So comparing the various levels of value against ourselves helps us see that optimal level of darkness or lightness that's gonna work well with our own contrast level. And based on this information, we can decide how to use colors together in a way that appears harmonious against ourselves from head to toe. Me, for example, we already saw that I need to wear colors that have enough depth in them, or I need colors that are closer to white that'll create a high enough contrast. But because my contrast level is not super high, colors like true black can still appear overwhelming on me. So as an alternative, I can use textures like large ribbed fabric like we talked about earlier, or I could use a slightly washed black instead of a jet black to lower the contrast slightly. And then when it comes to pastels, wearing icy colors, so colors that contain a lot of white with just a drop or a hint of a color, is a better choice rather than pastels with a higher concentration of pigment. If we switch over these images to black and white mode, we can see how the color with the higher saturation looks more gray and it doesn't create a high enough contrast against my skin tone. And then when it comes to deciding on color combinations, I know that I need to add enough contrast, but because my contrast level is medium to high and it's not super high, I can still get away with wearing a medium valued color in my bottoms as long as I match that with a top that creates a high enough contrast against my skin tone. For example, I could still wear these medium valued gray jeans, but I would wear it with a black top or an off-white top, so the contrast created is not as high as a true black and white combo, but it still creates a high enough contrast both between the colors and against my skin tone around the face. Now, if I were to switch out the bottoms to a true black, then this true black and white combo can look a little bit overwhelming and harsh on me. And then for instances where I'm wearing a solid color in all black or all white, I like to make sure to show enough skin so the color doesn't appear too overpowering around my face and the skin can kind of act as a way to neutralize and lower the overall harshness. So as you can see, even without considering saturation or temperature of colors, we can still practice getting dressed and training our eyes just using the different levels of value and our contrast level. And in the next video, we're going to talk a little bit more about saturation or clarity of colors and how the theory of contrast can apply in choosing the right level of brightness or softness in colors that will help us create that head to toe harmony. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure to smash those like and subscribe buttons before you go, and I'll see you in my next video. Until then, stay unique and stay gorgeous.